back to Two Dudes, One Barbell. This is episode number 4, and today we're going to be talking about some of the big rocks of training, nutrition, and achieving your goals, basically. So, we've got 2 studies we want to run through. One on protein intake, and we're going to talk about the importance of protein intake, and one about sleep and the importance of sleep. And if you nail these 2, you're going to get most of the work done. Then worrying about the rest of it. Was it the Pareto principle?
Yeah, the Pareto principle.
Getting 80% of the work done? Yep.
Yeah.
20% of the time. So we're going to talk about that. So, John has a study for us that is a
meta-analysis. That's the first one we're going to look at.
Yep. So, explain what a meta-analysis is.
So, just quickly, a meta-analysis is the summation of multiple studies, and these studies should be randomized controlled trials. So what that means is you got a select number of people and you intervene. That is a randomized controlled trial, and hopefully that will be double blind. Sometimes with exercise it can't be blinded because people know they're doing exercise.
Yep.
Right, and a meta-analysis is looking at a lot of different studies that are focusing on the same thing, and then they look at statistics, whether they all average out the same, to see if there is a difference across a larger population. So like in exercise science and in nutrition, sometimes interventional studies can be really, really small. And then by looking at a meta-analysis, you can get a larger sample and see if it is
consistent across larger groups.
So larger groups.
One group does their study, they get 50 individuals, they see something happens with those 50, and they can compare against all the other studies that have done something similar.
Exactly.
To see if it's consistent against 1,000.
Yeah. And then so if you've got a good scientist, they should be able to include or exclude research which are the same. So like I was talking to Adam before this, sometimes when people are measuring things, they might measure things with different methods, and sometimes it'll be harder for us to create an average from that.
Yeah.
But if they're using the same sorts of metrics, then it's very easy to do a meta-analysis.
So if one study uses a DEXA scan and the other study is using a DEXA scan, then you can compare the 2 pretty safely. But if one's doing like
skin folds,
yeah.
Or like or bioimpedance, you could use bod plots, those sorts of things. But what you want to see is them using the same sort of metric or the same sort of device, so we can know that that metric is consistent. Or reliable is actually probably the term, because we don't know really if they're
reliable at all the time.
Well, there's a difference between reliability and valid.
Yeah.
And are you familiar with that? Somewhat.
In
science, reliability means that you can consistently get the same result with the same measuring stick. Valid. So like if you got a ruler, it measures the same length no matter
every
what.
time.
Whereas validity means it's actually measuring what you want it to measure. So you might get the same result, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's
100% accurate.
Yeah. So like if we look at bioimpedance, and I don't mean to crap on it, but I will. It could be reliable, but it may not reflect
exactly what has actually happened.
Yeah.
And we could tack on 2% body fat to everyone.
Exactly. And then of course it's because it's measuring an electrical impulse. It's impacted heavily by salts and water
There's
content.
A lot of variability. There's a lot of potential to go wrong.
Anyway, so in this study, we hope that they've looked at the same sort of metrics. I think they used DEXA scans, so that's pretty good. There's obviously limitations, especially with short-term studies, seeing the differences with a DEXA scan. DEXA scan is just an X-ray looking at the density, and it's still calculated off an algorithm. Based off how much resistance they get through the X-ray. But it's better than most metrics.
And so there's no absolute 100% way to measure someone's body composition, apart from like killing them and weighing out their bits, right?
MRI is pretty good.
MRI is pretty good?
Yeah, it's probably the best way, but I mean, who's going to fork out that much money to just see how much muscle mass they get over
for
6 weeks?
Like for like 100 people or something like that. It's a very expensive thing.
Very, very expensive,
okay. So this study that we're looking at is the role of protein intake and its timing on body composition and muscle function in healthy adults a systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials.
Yeah, so we found one which was focusing on healthy adults. Of course, there might be differences with different groups, but I think it's got the most applicability to the people we're probably going to be listening and watching.
Because the total amount of people that participated, the sum total of this meta-analysis was what? It was like 2,000.
Yeah, the total amount was 2,907 over 65 studies. And this meta-analysis looked at both lean tissue and strength. But we're probably just going to focus on the body composition change because actually there wasn't a significant difference in strength change from just protein.
Yeah, so it was individuals when they increased their protein consumption, they found that there was no change in strength if strength training wasn't accounted for or wasn't included specifically in the plan.
And I think this is a problem when you're trying to look at so many topics at the same time. With the meta-analysis, they thought, oh, we got the data, we might as well take the averages anyway, we might as well run the maths. But I think their main focus was body composition. That's what we see the result in. Yeah.
And so we don't know whether these specific studies were including resistance training or not including resistance training.
Yeah, and it's going to be very hard for us to nitpick through 65 studies. So we're just going to look at the average.
But the sum total average, still shows sort of a trend. So they had an increase in muscle mass pretty much
just from eating
across
protein.
the board, just from an increased consumption of protein.
Yeah.
And so that's enough argument for the validity of protein in your diet and the importance of it and what it can do for you.
Something to add to that is they found in this particular meta-analysis, and maybe other studies might see different, is the timing of protein was not nearly as significant as, say, the total amount.
So getting your total consumption for the day, like net protein,
is the most important
factor before, should I eat it before my training, after my training, before bed, spread it out through the day. That's of much less importance than just getting enough in.
Yeah, and Brad Schoenfeld, I don't know if anyone's familiar with him, he's actually done a meta-analysis on timing as well, which is consistent with this, that the total amount was the most important.
Yeah.
And typically we will want to spread it out through the day. It's unlikely that you're going to have it all in one meal.
There's a lot of lot of meat in one bag.
That's a lot of meat in one bag. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, the total amount was most important, and then
timing can be, that's your extra 20%, like onwards. Yeah, so that's the icing on the cake.
That's beyond the 20%.
Yeah. So get your total consumption of the day. Spread it out if you can, but just get it in.
Yeah. Now, spreading it out, just to extend on that 20%, if we're going a little bit further, spreading out is going to make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Most definitely. But we're just talking about the big rocks.
The big rocks. Like starting at the top, like the most important, was the pyramid of like necessity.
Yeah.
It's like you want to start with the foundational stuff. It's like get protein, then maybe time it out. Then maybe concern yourself with what type.
Yeah. Afterwards, we can deal with like the amount of leucine per meal and that sort of.
And that sort of thing, which definitely plays a role in it to optimize things. But that's for optimization. Having protein spread out through the day has other benefits like satiety and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
For dieting, but specifically for muscle mass retention and gain, just get it in.
The total. And I think we'll probably just put a link to this.
This study,
so if people want to have a look at some of these.
Well, we're going to start posting these up on our Instagram as well, so you guys can have a look at it after the fact, and John's going to do a little bit of a rundown on our social media as well. What we were and what we're looking at, so you guys will be able to see this. But yeah, super interesting that you increase muscle mass just by increasing your protein intake.
And if you think about it, right, if the demands for protein for the muscle are low, your body isn't going to build protein. There's other things in the hierarchy that are more important to it than muscle mass.
Yeah. Which is why
bone,
if you want to...
skin. Well, skin is probably...
number one.
Well, I don't know if it's number one, but it's definitely important.
But maintaining other bodily functions.
Exactly.
That's why the training's important to tell your body, okay, I want you to do this with the protein.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just not going to bother with it.
It
takes energy.
Yeah, that's why I get really frustrated when people say, oh, what percentage of it is diet? What percentage of it is exercise? It's like, well, you can't. You really just... Here we can see you can get an increase of lean tissue with protein.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get any serious change.
So if you want
without
very,
exercise.
if you want very minimal results, then it's all nutrition.
Yeah.
If you
Exactly.
But if you want actual good results, then you have to have the training. And that goes for dieting down as well. And with like retaining muscle mass as you lose weight is huge, because if you the increased protein in your diet will help retain that muscle as you start to lower your body fat. It
Most
makes
definitely.
a big difference on how much of that fat you lose or how much weight you lose is actually fat mass or lean muscle mass.
Well, that's probably a good time to segue into the next
study about sleep, because both of these things will impact your lean muscle mass retention when you're dieting.
Particularly in a deficit.
Yeah, particularly in a deficit. And one more thing on the protein is that your muscle mass is very metabolically active tissue, so it takes a lot of energy to maintain.
Yeah.
And so that's why when you're dieting and trying to lose weight, if you're just doing cardio and you're not doing any resistance training, your body's going to go, we don't need these biceps or these butt muscles to keep doing things, so let's just burn them for energy and save our precious fat stores for later.
Your body doesn't need these butt
Yeah,
muscles.
that's what.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It's true. But
Like, yeah, because it'll tend to eat them up if you're not like. That's why bodybuilding is essentially just controlled starvation while trying to maintain muscle mass. That's it. And so like if you're not training and you're trying to do a bodybuilding show, then you're just going to eat your muscle mass away, which is the bodybuilder's biggest fear.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like every week I got to remind my body I still need biceps.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's just going to go, let's burn some biceps for energy. Let's do it.
Yeah, and that's a good way to approach it, but you understand your body is going to try and be as most efficient as possible.
Always.
And by telling it, like you said, that you still need the butt muscles,
Yeah.
then it's going to keep them to
Yeah.
some extent. Yeah.
Yeah, I made a point of the butt muscle because ladies, if you're trying to lose weight and just doing cardio, but you want a bum,
You'll lose the bum
You'll lose the bum
if you don't.
if you
stimulate
don't.
the-
You're not doing your butt like muscle exercises.
Yeah.
All right, so our second study we want to talk to today is about sleep, which is one of the other big rocks of training and exercise and body compositions. And it's a massively overlooked one by a lot of people. It was for me for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I was neglecting my sleep quality until I read a book and adequately scared myself shitless.
And we should actually talk about that book, because that book is excellent.
Pretty good, yeah.
It's
So
by Matthew Walker, isn't it?
Matthew Walker, yes,
And
called
it's-
Why We Sleep.
And if you have the time, please read that book.
Absolutely, like it's magic. I listened to this specifically the chapter on fat loss and sleep as it relates to it, like 3 times through. Because there's so many nuggets of just gold, and I'm like, I gotta remember all of this stuff. I wrote it down as well.
And you said he actually referenced this particular study.
Yeah, like he talked about this study and like specifically like just how intense it is if you don't get your sleep, how much muscle mass you'll lose when you're dieting.
Yeah. But just to illustrate it, we're going to look at some figures here.
Yeah.
So this was a randomized, well, it's not really randomized, but it's a controlled trial where they've intervened with a deficit, but they've provided the individuals with all the food that they would eat. So there's no room for error here. They're sitting in a room and they're like, here, you're going to eat this and you're not going to eat anything else. And so
all
their
calories
were
are equated, their macro breakdown, so everyone's consuming the same food.
Exactly the same food. The only thing that they changed was the allocated sleep time. And what was really clever about this study is they got every participant to do both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
So any outliers
got
got averaged out.
Luckily didn't respond as bad or
Yeah.
something like that. They did both.
Yeah, they did both.
And so the study's called Insufficient Sleep Undermines Dietary Efforts to Reduce Adiposity, which is body fat.
Yep.
And
if we just scroll down to the meat and potatoes, we're going
what
to
happened over the 2 trials. So they had they ran one group through each one. So like group A did the 8.5 hours of sleep
for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks, and group B at the same time was doing the 5.5 hours for 2 weeks. Then they had like a washout period.
Yep. So they got time to sort of recover. Yeah.
Yep. Refresh. Hit the reset button, and then they switched it and did it again.
Yep.
Yeah. And so all the food was completely matched between the 2 groups across both studies, both attempts, and our results were.
And they measured a lot of metrics, but what we're just focusing on is what most people well, most people listening would probably care about is the fact that whether you slept or allocated 8.5 hours or 5.5 hours, the weight loss was the same, but what weight you lost changed.
Yeah. So where it came from. So you lost X amount on the scales.
Yep. So there was 3 kilos lost in both groups, and it would be obviously displayed somewhere around here, right?
Weight loss. Yep.
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 And when they were only given 5.5 hours to sleep, they lost.
So our loss of fat-free mass for the 8.5 hour group was 1.5 kilograms, and then is that right? Yeah.
1.5 kilograms of fat-free mass.
Of fat-free mass, and then
1.4 of fat. And then when we went to 5.5 hours, they only lost 0.6 kilos on average of fat.
So 800 grams less.
Yep.
And then they lost
2.5 kilos of lean tissue.
So a whole kilo more muscle.
Yeah.
Essentially, or
over only
mass.
2 weeks.
Over 2 weeks.
Yeah. So if you're in a deficit and you're not sleeping, you're just eating your muscle.
You're just eating muscle away. That's
okay. Let's throw some caveats in here.
Yep.
How much were they training? Probably not training.
Probably not training. Yeah.
So how much does training ameliorate that issue? Would be something interesting to see going forward. But you can see it has a very profound effect when you equate or even out just calorie deficit.
Just the calorie deficit and what effect the sleep has on it.
Yeah.
And so say you were not, this is not training and not sleeping well, and then imagine if you're not consuming enough protein as well, then you're just gonna eat muscle away, and your body's gonna choose to keep its fat stores because it's a more optimal energy source.
Yeah, I mean the reasons for us to figure out what the reason for your body
to do
throw away lean tissue would be, we don't know, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean we can speculate. We can speculate that it's because lean tissue is harder to maintain, or it's probably largely to do with the hormones that we talked about, like cortisol and ghrelin, leptin, and how that's interacting within the body. But
there's nothing confirmed.
Like you can't, like it's hard for us to say until they do some sort of mechanistic study to work out what's actually happening.
Because there's still sort of like a lot of this science that they're doing, the studies they're doing is fairly.
This is pretty new. This is in the last.
This is the last. This is 2011.
Yeah.
That protein one was when you said
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things they're still working through figuring out, because I guess they've only just recently started to.
Yeah. I mean, there are some pretty cool studies on when they give people extra sleep.
Yeah.
Have you heard of them?
No.
No. Okay, so they've done this for some athletes where they allocate them extra sleep, and you see their recovery increase, their performances increase, and this is going from I think 8 hours to like 9.5 hours. 9.5 allocated.
Yeah.
But it's really hard for anyone to do these studies because no one wants to sleep more, apparently.
For like 9.5, 10 hours of sleep, it's a lot of your day. Like but I've heard that recommendation before. Like I've read in a few like different books and stuff like that, recommending athletes. So like the average person should sleep from like 7 to 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
An athlete should sleep up to 9+. That's what like you hear around, you get thrown around, and it's like you can definitely see the validity of it.
Most definitely. Well, maybe I can try and pull together some of those
studies.
There was definitely one on swimmers, which was pretty profound.
He talks about that Why We Sleep book. He talks about like some teams and stuff like that that allocated like basketball teams that made their athletes sleep like 10 hours a night, and then there was changes in performance and stuff like that.
I mean, you can't induce sleep, but you allocate the certain amount of time.
Made them sleep.
Yeah, you take the phones off them and you force them.
Just locked in a room in the dark.
Sleep now.
Yeah, you sleep now. For the sake of the team.
Yeah.
But because like, I know I personally don't sleep more than, I'd say 7 or 8 hours, unless, like I always wake up at that time. I don't naturally, there's no way if I lay myself down, I don't naturally sleep for like 9-10 hours unless I'm like hungover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also depends on what time you go to sleep, right? You might wake up at the same time. Is that, like once your clock is set, then you sort of wake up around the same time.
Like your body clock sort of thing? Yeah. I find that. Like I always wake up around 6:30 even on weekends.
Yeah, and whether you go to bed at like 10 or 9 or 2.
2 in the morning. Yeah, you always,
You probably will wake up at the same time. So it's about working out what your bedtime is. Is probably the
optimized sleep. Yeah.
Optimized sleep.
I need to go to bed earlier.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're training people to like 9:30, like how much you got to go home, get some food, and lots of people probably want to unwind a little bit.
Yeah,
you don't want to just like fall
work.
straight into bed. Like as soon as you
10
get
hours
home.
starts now. Yeah.
I need to allocate my 10 hours of sleep so I can get the gains.
I'd be interested to know how significant the difference is in that like 1.5, 2 hours sleep increase, and like if it would equate to over the span of a year, like an extra 2 kilos of muscle in a trained individual. That'd be massive.
Oh my goodness. But we can't do those studies. It's too ridiculous.
It's too ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah.
You can get like one dude might be able to do it anecdotally and be like, yeah, I did it for a year and I blew up. But
I heard, this is obviously speculation, and I heard through the grapevine that Dmitry Klokov would sleep more than 9 hours a day.
Dmitry Klokov.
Do you know who that is?
No.
Dmitry Klokov is a Russian weightlifter.
Alright.
Yeah, you need to pull up a picture of this man.
I think I might know the name.
Probably everyone watching will know who he is.
Dmitry
Klokov. It's with a K.
Oh, okay. We'll see. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
This is the guy I'm thinking of. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so he's like an aesthetic weightlifter, right?
He could be a bodybuilder, but
he could be a bodybuilder,
like
but
an
he was
Olympic weightlifter.
Yeah, and he got a silver medal. Anyway, he would drink like 4 cans of Coke a day, and but he would sleep a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you want to see some crazy stuff, you go to look at Klokov's hang snatch, 200 kilo hang snatch, which is pretty crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, there it is. Pause snatch full session.
Yeah, crazy. Anyway, that was rumored, and I only know this because when I was working in Singapore, there was a guy who went to one of Charles Poliquin's seminars.
Yeah.
And Klokov was there.
Really?
And they were talking to
cool.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing all sorts of funky stuff.
It'd be interesting to hear their secrets and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, there was like a lot of Charles Poliquin was a bit of a guru.
Yeah.
So there was like a lot of stuff about balancing your hormones and that sort of thing. So there's obviously some truth to what he says, and then how much of it is like embellished. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's the whole difference between like gurus and like the science, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like you get the bodybuilding gurus that just sort of like, yeah, it works. And it might work for like a lot of people, but they don't know why it works necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's bro science,
That's
right?
bro science, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's always fun though when like a bit of bro science gets proven in literature.
Yeah.
Like a study comes out and it's like, ha! So the bros have been doing it.
Well, it's like the high rep squat thing, right?
High rep squat thing?
Yeah. For a long time, I think it was for a couple of decades, they used to think that the peak hypertrophy range was between, 8 to 12 reps at 70% of your 1 RM, and now it's like
you can see gains up to like 20 plus or like
20 to 30 reps
yeah.
at 30%, as long as you're as close to failure as possible.
Yeah,
and
which is
like
massive.
Yeah,
which is something we'll have to dedicate a podcast to. Like that's a big factor of hypertrophy training. I think the big rocks when it comes to your training and what you're doing is going to make the most difference. So we definitely need to do a full podcast on training, optimizing training, and what you need to focus on. We talk about movements and the movements that get more bang for buck.
Yeah.
But then it's like how to train those movements and what's going to give you the best results.
What's the last thing that we would probably what's missing from our equation now? We've got sleep. That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we need to most of us as adults need at least 7.5 hours sleep.
Yeah.
You need to allocate probably 8.5 hours to let you get
to be in bed. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then the protein. Well, we haven't talked about dosages, but maybe we did last time. But we need at least 1 gram per kg, and it's more important to get the total amount. If you can distribute it, that's better.
And so recommended dosage between sort of typically recommended and then optimal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your views on optimal? Like how far would you push up protein?
Okay,
consumption?
So it's the equation that I tell most of my students is if you're in a surplus, you probably only need 1.6 grams per kg of body mass.
Yes.
and that's to allocate enough calories so you can eat more calories to gain mass, right? If you're trying to lose lean tissue, you're going to use protein to satiate, right? Not lose lean tissue, but lose fat. Yeah, sorry, you don't want to lose lean tissue. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're trying to lose fat mass and maintain lean tissue. Yes. So when you're in a deficit and trying to diet down, you increase it. You jack it up. Yeah.
Up to 2.2 grams per kg of body mass.
Typically what I aim for and what I recommend for people if they're trying to diet down, which is most people.
Yeah, most people probably want to lose fat mass, and the added benefit of protein being satiating is probably up there.
Yeah, huge.
There is one study which I'll probably bring up at some stage because I really like it, but I don't know how much applicability it has, where they compared 1.5 grams per kg of body mass versus 3 grams per kg of body mass, and they saw an increase of reaction time with the 3 grams
of protein.
Yeah.
So increasing protein, like doubling the intake of protein.
Double the intake of what would be recommended for most people. Yeah. Increased reaction time.
Really?
Yeah.
What the hell? There you go.
Super cool.
That's super interesting.
But there's only been one study, so yeah.
And there's a big myth that's been around for years about like too much protein being bad for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
not a thing.
Yeah, not a thing. I mean, there's probably a cap on how much protein we can handle, but it's unlikely that you'll be able to eat it.
Yeah, it would be several hundred grams. It's like there's stories of bodybuilders eating 400 grams of protein a day.
Yeah, there's heaps of studies with people having 70% of the intake being protein and being fine.
And being completely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's no lethal dosage really. Well, there probably is with everything.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be worried about your kidneys failing or whatever myth used to be. So like what protein was bad for your kidneys, wasn't that the old myth?
I mean, if you have chronic kidney disease, then you maybe shouldn't be having high doses of protein, but for the most people, it's actually going to help your kidneys develop. Kidney tissue gets stronger if you make it process more.
And that's a good point about like everything. There's nuances to everything. It's like people are scared of saturated fat, and you should only really be scared of saturated fat if you've got heart condition or something like that, right? Isn't that like or diabetes, being scared of carbs?
If you should ever be scared of saturated fat, but. Yeah, then again, I'm not a doctor.
So we're not doctors. We should put
a little disclaimer there.
But I find that super. And like salt is another one. Everyone's scared of salt.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, that's a real interesting one because I think that's been exacerbated like crazy.
The fear of salt?
Fear of salt.
Definitely.
But it's a sort of a generational thing. Like usually when I talk to people younger than me, they're not that scared of salt.
Yeah. Well, I think it was probably the era where they brought out a whole bunch of jargon. Someone's brought out this fad thing like cut out salt and you'll improve your hormones or something like that, and it's probably been all over the television.
Yeah.
People have consumed it. It's the same reason people are scared of carbohydrates, and it's always the older generation, usually not the younger generation that have grown up with the stuff like people. Why they see me adding salt to my food and they go, "What the hell are you doing?" And
I mean, it's ergogenic.
I just keep going. Yeah, it is like it boosts performance.
Like crazy.
Yeah, and so people just blows their mind.
It's like walking to the PT studio and lick a little bit of salt.
Yeah, you can come in and get my salt and get a handful of it. Yeah.
Go do some like heavy singles. Yeah.
And like I noticed when I started increasing my salt significantly, not significantly, but started putting salt on all my meals, that I got like fairly well stronger, like quite quickly too. Within the span of a week, I noticed my performance increased.
I think it's important that people understand why they eat these micronutrients, because if you start limiting micronutrients specifically, and I think demonizing micronutrients is kind of silly because they're actually essential for health, but sodium in itself is essential for neural firing and fluid retention. Yeah. And those two things.
But that scares people, fluid retention. You say that around some people and they go, "Oh no, I don't want that."
Do you know we could just rebrand it hydration, couldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Like, salt is essential for hydration, and then people would be fine with it.
That's like I like asking people like how often they pee. Because if they're I'm like, do you feel dehydrated? And it's like, yeah. How much water do you have to drink? Like 3 liters. I'm like, how much time has you peed today? like 4 or 5 times, like 6 times, and like you just
Not
find
enough
yourself
salt.
peeing every like 30
Yeah.
minutes or something like that, you don't have enough salt in your system to retain that fluid.
Yeah, I
So
guess,
you-
yeah, when me saying fluid retention is probably...
People think of it of like bloating and looking fatter or something like that.
Yeah, well, your muscles will look fuller. I mean,
Yeah.
sodium, yeah, we can talk about where it typically stays in the membrane, but and where you're going to retain the fluid the most, because depending on whether it's cation or anion, and depending on the type of micronutrient, they're going to be in different spaces within the body, which will affect hydration in different points.
Places, yeah.
But largely, most people probably don't have enough sodium,
And
unless they're eating lots of takeaway food, and then their
Yeah.
sodium is absolutely fine.
yeah. But then
know?
you get the other people that when people go super healthy diets of like chicken and broccoli and rice,
Yeah,
there's no sodium in that, and they get sodium deficient,
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah,
it's crazy. You can go like not too healthy, but the society's idea of healthy
I mean,
is not necessarily the best.
yeah, I think healthy doesn't need to be restrictive.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent.
That was a bit of a tangent, yeah. But that's something else we'll need to talk about and elaborate on. But we hope that we've elaborated a little bit on some of the big rocks when it comes
Yep.
to nutrition and body composition. So like, make sure you're consuming enough protein. Don't necessarily worry about where you're getting it from or how often you're having it, what time of day. Just get it in. That's the hardest bit, what people struggle with the most. And then make sure you're getting enough sleep. You can be training your ass off and doing everything else right, but if you're getting 3-4 hours of sleep a night, you're gonna get nowhere.
Yeah.
And so it'll make a significant difference in your results of the gym.
And I think maybe we'll bring a few more studies on the sleep stuff, because it's pretty
Definitely.
interesting.
It's a super interesting subject, absolutely. But for now, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.